Hey, what's up, Toby? How you doing,
Hey,
man?
doing well, buddy. Welcome.
Guess what? We're at 32 because I can't count.
What?
I know.
You're
So
the
let me tell you.
Excel guru. Maybe we should have put in an Excel sheet when we started this. We had a numbering system.
We should have. So in my little podcast, we use RSS, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
They don't support us, but maybe they will someday. you put in the episode number and then the season.
Oh, okay.
And I forgot to put in a season, and so we made it to 32.
Wow.
I know.
That's like just flashing forward into the future.
I know. It's amazing.
Listeners have been enjoying a bonus this whole time. Welcome to episode 32.
It's very incredible. All right. So today's topic.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Most businesses optimize their silos.
Yeah.
Few optimize what happens between them.
Ooh.
That's the topic.
Ooh. Yeah. I love that, Chris. It's the white space. We play the notes. We don't think about what happens between the notes. Everybody's playing their instrument. We don't think about the transition in between. Let's get into this. I love this.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? Is it is it failure? What are you thinking about between silos and
I think it's human nature. I think by nature we get very myopic.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like, and I think we get myopic and then we just don't get curious. And so you end up like doing things. And I see this a lot in product where people are like, well, tell me what you're doing. And what I'm asking is like, what piece of work are you delivering downstream, or what, like, that's the question that I'm asking. And what I get told oftentimes is they're like, I click the button.
Yeah.
Well, what does the button do? Well, I click the button.
Chris, I love that because they're a black box, right? We see the input.
Yeah.
They do whatever they do in their black box because they should be an expert. And then we want to understand what comes out the other end for the next party or for the customer.
Yeah.
And they're telling you like how they tied their shoelaces. And you're like, no, to what end? What's the value of having paid you for a day?
Yeah.
Or a week,
or like,
month?
or like in a client servicing team, it's like, but where did you get this? They're like, well, the client emailed me. I'm like, no, like, where did the problem happen? Like, the client sent an email, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go sit in the corner and think about what I've just heard, because it's a bit rough.
I'm gonna rethink a number of choices that have brought to this point.
Yeah.
You know what I love though is your point about curiosity, because sometimes the questions we ask are answered correctly, but we ask the wrong question.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what I'm hearing is a little bit of how do we put things in context to get the answers we want? We're asking and inviting enough room for people to get super narrow and myopic in it, or for them to be so broad and general to be useless. How do we start to find that level so they're telling us what we need to know? Yeah. What kind of examples? There's something that comes to mind, or why do you think this? Maybe there's an underlying here that we want to touch on first. You said human nature, maybe, and lack of curiosity. Other thoughts maybe about why this silo at the cost of systems is continuing to happen?
I think it's because it's easier. It's easier to make your silo efficient. It's just flat out super easy.
Back to like a span of control thing. What's with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're not being measured on someone else's silo or measured on the system. You're being measured on how well your silo does.
Yeah.
Enter the world of gamification.
That's right. Gamification, AI, blockchain synergy, baby.
Well, what's funny is like, it makes me go to like, if you give someone an objective, we are just remarkably good.
Yes.
At tracking whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
So a primary example is most systems like ServiceNow or Zendesk, they'll give they'll put in a little token or a little ID for the ticket.
Yep.
And, a place that I was working, there was a SLA to respond to to this thing within X amount of hours, right?
Right.
But what happened is they were sending an email, they were CCing it, right? So the first email has no token on it.
Okay.
Right? All the second and thirds have the token on it. Okay.
Yep.
So here's what happens in these implementations. And this is why you actually get a thank you for responding. Please respond above this line. Yeah. The reason you get that is you get that auto response because if you do a reply or send the email to a bunch of different people, what ends up happening, especially if it's before hours, is you get a ton of people replying back and forth without the token, right? So now all of a sudden,
so you got to flush that one.
What you get is you get a ton of duplicates. Okay. So in this Salesforce instance that I was implementing, I was like, we should do auto reply. And people were like, well, that will mess with our SLA. And it's like, do you like merging all the cases that use duplicates? Yeah. Well, I mean, when we merge them, we don't get ranked. And you're like, oh boy.
How far do I back up my bus to help them understand the value of what I'm proposing? Let's try again. Yeah. Okay. So where'd you go next?
Yeah. I mean, some people were like, well, we want to do it and we don't want to do it. So it was like a customer by customer basis, but it was like, this is ridiculous. And then the other thing is that they didn't want their SLA to be at 0.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can we just make it easier for everybody? Like,
totally.
It was so weird. Like, and it reminds me of like, remember when Wells Fargo did their little fiasco on like, we have to open all these accounts?
I do. Go into that. That's a good example though.
Yeah. So like, I mean, basically it was like, we've got to grow accounts. And so you know what they did? They grew their accounts. They were very effective.
Yeah. One for you and one for you and one for you.
The thing that they forgot is to ask if their clients wanted them to create duplicate accounts. Like they kind of missed that vital step, but they were successful and sued.
Yeah. There's this one ethical step that kind of matters. Yeah. Well, but it's true. And I think that speaks to your point earlier about the incentive. And so sales team, your financial well-being, your continued success in your career here is driven by this activity.
Yeah.
And so if you're given a single carrot and everything else is consequence, why wouldn't you just chew up everything that looks like a carrot and let somebody else sort it out? Because it's not their problem. It's the ethics department. Internal audit will figure it out later when they get around to discovering what we've done or not. So no, it's interesting because you're right. And sales guys are notoriously awesome at finding all the little white space between the rules and bylaws and disclaimers of any sales comp plan, which makes comp in general a little bit slippery. And, we've talked offline over the years about how do you increase agency within teams? How do you build a sense of ownership? And then the same organizations that might say that are also, you're exempt. You're going to get paid whether you mail it in or actually throw your heart and soul into the work.
Yeah.
And we're still going to ask you to work weekends because you're a free resource to us now. And so, strangely, how we align people's heads and hearts with the broader picture is a finer art than we like to, acknowledge. And so, I love that. Another example is, as you were sharing Wells Fargo, what made me think about was, as you and I often do, a couple gray whiskers means that we've been a place or two so far in our career.
Yeah.
As a young and super enthusiastic financial analyst, I was working in healthcare, and it was a spectacular experience. This was in the late 90s, before Sarbanes-Oxley caused large organizations or publicly traded organizations to put in a lot of safeguards. It was the world of hammer and champy process engineering. So we're like, get rid of all these unnecessary reviews. Let's chuck stuff out. One of the projects where it was less about stripping down the process to its core dimension that we did was working within the emergency department of a county hospital.
Oh, wow.
And so, for anybody that's ever had the misfortune of going to an emergency department, we know what that experience looks like. And it usually involves, bring a brand new 700-page book because you'll probably finish it before you actually get seen.
Yeah.
And as the county was growing, they said our wait times just continued to increase. And so for them, that was the first time that they said, let's take a really hard look at how we triage.
Sure.
And so that's still inside of the silo of just the emergency department.
Yeah.
But as we got in and we started talking with the nurses and the physicians, and then the folks that do so much of that diagnostic stuff, the lab said, we don't even know a lab is needed, and stuff shows up and we've already got a whole calendar. We haven't built a schedule, so we don't have enough humans on staff. But if you want these 2 or 3 most common tests, why don't we just set up the equipment in the ER? We'll show somebody how to do it and they can get turnaround in 10 minutes or less. It wasn't the big brains at the top of the company that said this.
That's funny.
These were day-to-day techs. And we went, well, that's interesting. Hey, let's go ask the x-ray guys. So we looked through the imaging and they said, interestingly, x-rays are important. Those we can turn fast. I want to say it was CTs. And so management all of a sudden is like, well, that's kind of expensive. But when we showed them the sheer volume of CTs and how quickly those could be turned, they said all day long, if we can still build those and not disrupt other stuff, that's a great investment. Let's push that piece of equipment in. And so we had this really messy blend of sniffles and sneezes. And this guy has, a chunk of rebar stuck through his skull. I don't know how to prioritize these. They started to really think intentionally about triaging and starting to separate these. And it wasn't just getting people through the ER. It was also asking, where do we want to ultimately disposition these humans? If it's sniffles and sneezes, can we get them in and out in 30 minutes and full of Tylenol? And if the guy's got rebar, we probably need to figure out if we have room in the ICU and we have enough corks to thread through there and plug the bleeding, or do we need to send them across town to something else?
Yeah.
And so many of my projects, I call this out because this is a case where by talking with the people that are living with those hard handoffs, and it's just causing all this emotional grind for them, they already knew the answer. And I think this is true of so many companies. When we're curious about what's upstream and downstream, our peers will tell us why they aren't able to perform. And they're probably just as frustrated as we are.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, there was a window of time where we did get this down and we had a 2.5 average wait time in the ER from that first sign up and admit at the desk being dispositioned, whether it was back home with Tylenol or we're going to send you upstairs and have a team of surgeons get that metal out of your face. So
that's crazy.
It was insane. And I would kill for that today. Maybe not literally, but maybe literally. But I mean, that's not the world that we live in today. And I think part of it is, to your point, it's the silo mentality.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is here I am just thinking your wait time could have been delayed by 45 minutes because they don't have enough blood techs.
Yeah.
And that, what the blood techs were probably saying? Their bosses are like, you need to move faster. And they're like, we don't have capacity here.
Yeah. You're on night.
And so then,
what are you doing? Are you guys playing? It was pre-Xbox. It's like, get off your ColecoVision or whatever was.
Your Atari.
Yeah.
Quit playing Tank.
That's right. There's listeners that are like, never even heard of these platforms. Is this a new
What is
movie?
Atari?
Yeah.
Atari had 3 buttons. It was amazing. All right. So it's Fix It Friday.
Fix It Friday.
What do we do today to fix handoffs?
Yeah. What is that? I mean, I just shared for me in that example, it was asking people on both sides of that handshake. I'm passing the baton, you're receiving it. How do we have an intelligent conversation so we stop dropping it?
Yeah.
But I love your Wells Fargo one because that's a little bit more meta.
Yeah.
Right. And the costs were really high. I mean, you think about the Wells Fargo example, how might you fix that? Or how should organizations think about that before they start panel stuffing?
I don't think you fix that. I think that's broken culture. And I don't, it's like,
yeah, put them out of business.
No. I mean, I don't think you do, but I do think individually.
Yeah.
I think being curious on a Friday.
Yeah.
To say, why do we do it this way? Right now, ultimately what you're going to find, I think, is you're going to find humans gamifying the system. Everybody knows that the system is gamified because the KPIs and all of the metrics are driven towards the gamified metrics.
Yeah.
Right. But those aren't where the solutions are.
That's right.
And so like, I think, and the funny thing is that, and I think I'm just ridiculously stubborn when I find a problem. Like I literally, I was joking because I did this really cool thing at work that it was if we had it was with 3 different teams.
Okay.
And 3 different completely, like, it was a DBA. It was a dev that was offshore. It was a different dev team that I have no, like, it's basically influence over this other dev team.
Oh,
and we did a solid, it was a solid week of work in about 6 months. Right. Just because, and because I was begging, borrowing and stealing and getting into sprints.
Just a second. I want to make sure it took you 6 months to get a week worth done, or you got 6 months of work in 1 week?
It took me 6 months to get a week's worth of work. If we would have got them all in the same room. Right. But again, like,
that hurt my brain when you said that, because that's such a shit experience. And I'm like, no, that's on topic, but I want to make sure I heard that right. It is the worst possible sequence.
And some of it was like this one team, the DBAs had to go and create the table, right? Then, the offshore team had to change the endpoint, and the people that own the code locally had to go and write the code. And then we found an issue and we had to go and update the table. And so if you think about it, like, every single change was basically a 2-week sprint.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's all the capacity. And I wasn't asking for a lot of time from these people, but like, again, like, I think it was my curiosity that helped me actually get data to actually realistically solve the problem.
Yeah.
But it also wasn't something that I could have done in a short fashion, because there's no way that an individual contributor can actually go and actually change the KPIs.
Yeah.
Because the system's against them. So if you're an individual contributor, go get a wild hair and chase something down.
Yeah, I love that.
And just be stubborn about it. If you're a manager, like, figure out how much your stuff is gamed. Because your report that you see is not gamed, right?
Yeah.
The report you see is flashy and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
If you click down 1 and you click down 2, you will find empty shells of work.
Chris, I love that. I want to restate the same idea in the spirit of Fix It Friday. And it's that if your goal is to process a task, leave your head in the sand, go about your day. If your goal is to have an impact and improve the system, you've got to paint a broader picture than just your desktop. And that means bringing other people into the conversation.
100%.
So that's a really great example. I love that. Well, happy Friday.
Yep. Cool, man. We'll catch you next week.
All right. We'll see you. Have a great week.
All right. Bye.